You are listening to Dream and Do, a podcast for big-hearted creatives, empaths, and sensitive souls who are ready to show up wholeheartedly in their businesses and their lives. My name is Nicola Ray Wickham, and I'll be helping you to be seen and heard and build brands that make a real, meaningful contribution to the world. Your whole self is welcome to this table, and you're invited to pull up a chair and join me for confidence pep talks, soulful insights, and practical tips on all things creativity, marketing, truth-telling, and story sharing, and powerful conversations with amazing, wholehearted women who are dreaming and doing in action and disrupting the status quo as they go. This is the stuff you're going to wish you knew years ago, but don't worry, we are doing this in community, you are not alone, and it's not too late. This is our time. Before we get into this conversation, I'm taking a moment to shout out the sponsor of this episode of the podcast, Visit Health. Visit Health provides same-day nursing care services, laboratory and functional tests. And best of all, they come to you. So over the years, I have become even more interested in wellness, the wellness space and the wellness industry, hence my business and my brand. And of course, with that comes my interest in my own personal wellness. After having my youngest daughter, who is now 16 months old, I knew it was important for me to have my vitamin D levels checked, especially as a Black person. So many of us are deficient in this area. So in working with Visit Health, I chose to have my vitamin D levels tested. I mean, Marley's sleep is all over the place, so I'm that little bit knackered a lot of the time, but I just felt like it was a bit more than that in terms of the way that I was feeling. And I had this suspicion that things weren't right, but I had just kept putting it off. And then the pandemic happened. And I don't know about you, but I really don't want to be going to the doctor's surgery unless I absolutely have to. And also, in some cases, we wouldn't even be able to get an appointment for something like this because it's not considered an emergency. So in working with Visit Health, I chose to get my vitamin D levels tested. Super easy. Book a visit, meet the medic, and get the results all in a super short time frame. And that's just the thing, right? It's so easy for us to put our health at the bottom of the list, ignore the nudges and the niggles until it becomes an emergency situation. And then suddenly we feel justified in making that appointment or asking for help or asking to be checked out and tested. We're often so kind of quick to try the latest wellness fad without having a grip on the basics of our health. This is a way of us prioritizing our own wellness. So Visit Health have a variety of tests that you can take with them, and you can find out more at visithealth.london. Hey loves, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I've got another wonderful guest for you, and we have a really nourishing and deep, rich conversation. Really rich. We go there. I have got Laura Husson. She's the host of the Get Unstuck podcast, and she's a certified subconscious transformation coach. And the reason why I really wanted to talk to Laura was because she had expressed some opinions and some experiences that she had had recently within the coaching industry, which were really aligned to my beliefs and thinking and my experiences of it. So you guys will know that I've been talking a lot about it not being or feeling like a place where it's about personal development for the many. It's actually personal development for the few. And it's not truly seeing, hearing and understanding people because it's coming from this cookie cutter model of how things are. And lived experience and nuance matters in every context, and it really matters in coaching. So Laura and I got together to talk about white supremacy in the coaching industry. Yes, that's super small topic, right? We went in talking about this, and it was a real honor to have Laura there and bringing her open heart and open mind staying in the room, even though it may have felt difficult, and really just being present. And yeah, it's a great conversation. And it's just the start of the conversation. Neither of us are coming to the table proclaiming that we've got all of the answers. But where we are at the moment is there is so much that's not even being said. So to even being able to sit down and start saying them and shine a light on it, that in itself is helpful. And then we can move into finding answers. And I just want to start this conversation more so that we can move into a place of making personal development for the many and not the few. But where we are now is that so many people need it highlighting to actually what is going on and the disservice that is being done to so many people. So enjoy. I really can't wait to hear what you think about it. Without further ado, here is the episode.
Laura, welcome to the podcast.
I am so excited to be here and to have this conversation and to have with you.
I feel like ever since we booked this in the diary, every time I've heard something or thought of something, I've got I'm running over to my notes. I'm like, I want to capture this to talk through with Laura.
I love it. I cannot wait to hear it.
It feels like there's been so much. It's one of those things that once your mind is open to something, the floodgates open, and I feel like I have been wanting to have this conversation forever, and being able to have it with someone as wonderful as you is just it's exciting.
Oh, you're so kind. I love it. And I'm really grateful to be having it because as I said to you before, I'm excited to be talking about all these things. And I know it's not my conversation to host. So I'm like, yes, let's have the conversation because it's so important.
Great. Okay. Before we dive into it, can you let those people who might not have heard of you kind of say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I was like, what do you mean they don't know who I am?
It's so funny. Whenever anyone says that to me when I'm being interviewed, I literally have that thought. What? And I'm like,
what do you mean? Who are these people who don't know who I am?
I love that we can just say that openly.
Okay, now I've got the giggles, but I always have the giggles. I love to laugh. So that's probably an important thing for people who are new to me to know is if we can laugh together, we can be friends. That's important. So I am Laura Husson. And I am totally Laura all over the web, my website, my socials. And I really am now really fully claiming my totally Laura life. And I work with coaches. I coach coaches. And I'm really here to help people who kind of feel like they've either lost that spark, they're stuck, or they've lost clarity in some way. And there's just perhaps an invisible barrier between where they are and the success and the fulfillment and the happiness that they know is possible for them. And that's, in life and in business. So all the things.
Amazing. And way back in the day, did you used to do websites?
I was the website girl, yes.
It's so funny because literally I feel like I've known you for a really long time, but you didn't know who I was. And I remember, and it's so weird, isn't it, that you never know what's going to happen. It's probably when I joined the Lucky Bee community. I've been part goodness me, about 4 or 5 years. And roll forward 5 years, I never thought we'd be having this conversation. It's so wonderful how things work out.
So good. And I feel like you're one of those people, I've met a few people like this on my journey around Entrepreneurville, where once you meet them, you're like, oh my gosh, yes, looking backwards, I remember you from here and I know you from there. And I feel the same. I feel like your name was familiar to me forevermore. So
what's really interesting about that though is that I feel like I was so quiet in the beginning. I was the shy girl at school, and it continued right into entrepreneurship. And it's only really in the last maybe 3 years that my voice has started to kind of be amplified, and I've been able to find it. And then really in the last 2 years, and then obviously in the last 8 weeks.
I mean, you've been flung into it, whether you liked it or not. So
right.
It's good you were in training. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it then.
Yes.
And I was really keen to chat with you when I saw you talking on social media about spirituality, the coaching industry. And I think you used the word that it's really exclusionary.
Yeah.
You want to tell me a bit more?
Oh, gosh. It just gives me that sinking feeling in my stomach. You know, it's like while I was so looking forward to having the conversation, there's just this heaviness that this conversation has to be had. You know, it's like, and for me, as somebody who, you know, I'm obviously working on exploring my own white privilege and really understanding what that means and how far back that goes and all of the work that goes with that. And understanding that I had no awareness, you know, I had no awareness until about probably a year ago, I would say. And I can't even tell you what it was that kicked it off, but I was so obsessed, much like you. So my first introduction, and somebody just asked me on Saturday, when you left teaching, because I was a teacher before, when I left teaching in 2010, she was like, well, people ask me this all the time. They're like, but how did you know it was time? And were you into law of attraction and manifestation at that time? And I was like, absolutely not. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what any of that was. And Denise was my intro as well. That was reading her book was the first time I'd, you know, contemplated that, and joining her money boot camp. It was like, is it magic? I dismissed it for like a year because I was like, I think she's selling magic and I really want to believe in it, but surely not. You know, it was so strange. And then it was that was really, I mean, I just went all the way in. It was like, oh my gosh, this works. And that was it. It was like hungry for it, hunting out any opportunity to find more opportunity to read about anything to do with law of attraction, the vortex, all of the things. And I've been through I feel like all of the coaching programs, all of the courses, all of the everythings. And every time I would hear people speak about it, I started to just get a twang of like something is rubbing, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And it was really, really highlighted to me very recently in the conversation that I know. I sent out a really long email to my list explaining the experience that I had had. And it really slammed it home for me. And I paid to attend, I think it was a 3-day online workshop with a really well-known coach in the law of attraction space. And I went to attend the first part, and all of the panel were all from the US, all kind of middle-aged, I guess, all white. And they broke out for this like little breakout session, and they were encouraging questions in the comments. And they kept saying, you have to pick up your rose-tinted glasses and just keep looking ahead no matter what's going on around you. And I was like, I don't know about that.
And the timing of this was right in the middle of like George Floyd.
Literally.
Right?
Yes, literally. I feel like probably just on the other side of the like blackout time where everybody turned their ads off and muted their, you know, about amplifying black voices. I think that's when it was. And so obviously I'm hyper aware at that time anyway. But why weren't they? That's the question. You know, why weren't they? So in the questions, I just dropped into the questions and said, you know, I get this, I understand. And I'm wondering how you suggest we go about picking up the rose tinted glasses, because they were literally picking up a pair of physical glasses and putting them on their face and saying, they were modeling it. Like, this is what you do.
Wow.
And I was like,
when you're a kid and you go, la, 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 put your hands in the air, la, 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 la. I was ignoring everyone.
Literally, it was like that. And so I posted in the questions, and I just said, there weren't that many people posting questions. And I posted in the question, I said, look, I get this, and I would love to ask. And I was trying to word it in the way that was not going to trigger people, but I had to ask the question. I was like, how do you suggest that we go about putting our rose-tinted glasses on continuously while still staying committed to the obviously needed work around dismantling systemic racism. And it was just bypassed. Like the question was just like skipped by. And I thought, okay, don't presume they've skipped it, right? Like, because that is not cool. Don't do that to them. So I just checked with the admin. I said, I asked the question, did that get seen? And she said, yeah, we have your question logged. And I was like, okay, cool. So I stayed on waiting for my question to be answered. All the other questions were answered. And then they said, I think we're at the end of the questions. And I was like, wow, okay. And so I waited for the second break to see if maybe they still had it. I was told again, yeah, we have it on file. And again, it was completely eliminated. And what was worse was the host, the kind of face and vision of the whole thing, came on after the first Q&A and started to try and address it really messily, and then just basically abandoned ship. He was like, all right, anyway, and then just went back. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is just so painful. And so following that was when I was so activated. Like I was just in, this is not acceptable. And knowing the size of audience and the reach that Messenger, and that platform has, I emailed in. And I emailed in like right away as soon as it was finished. And I said, look, I understand my ticket was no refund. So, because I read all the small print, ticket is no refunds. Office hours are like, I was about 45 minutes out of office hours. But I was like, here's what happened. And I relayed the whole thing to them. And the reply to my email came within 15 minutes out of office hours. Right. Thanks for your feedback. We've processed a full refund. And that's it.
No way.
So I sat with that and I slept on it because I was like, don't just be reactionary where it's not, just sit with it. Maybe something more is going to come. And I woke up the next morning, I was like, this is not okay with me. Like, yes, it's cool that they gave the refund. It wasn't about the money. It was about, I don't want to be giving my money to supporting that kind of messaging. And I just replied back and I said, look, I appreciate the refund and the speedy reply. I would still love to have, I'd really love to have this question answered. And I reiterated it. And I would love to invite a conversation with a representative to say, where you all stand on it. No reply, still to this day. So.
Wow. And
yeah.
That refund is really telling in that. That's like bypassing upon bypassing, isn't it? It's like, we don't want to engage with you anymore. Yeah. We don't want you in our space. So if you do the refund, then you won't have any kind of cause to come back to us. You can just go away.
That's exactly. It felt like just get rid of the troublemaker.
Yes.
That was what it felt like.
Wow.
And then when I shared the email, I wrote a really long email to my list and I included screenshots. I blanked out the names because I'm not here to I'm not really into the whole call out vibe and stuff. And I haven't quite decided if that's my thing. I feel like I can do it on the way I did it. I can ask the questions and have the conversation. I don't necessarily feel it's my place to do it, like broadcasting it. Still haven't decided how I sit on that. But I did send an email out with screenshots of the conversation to just raise awareness of the fact that these are the kinds of, because people were like, I don't know where to start. It's like, okay, that's fine, but find somewhere, find somewhere to start. And I wanted to show an example of how you could ask a question without being, I didn't need to be antagonistic about it. It was just, there's a question here and it deserves an answer. And that's that.
I'm really glad that you did that. I'm really glad that you did that because I have been in situations where I have felt like I couldn't.
Yeah.
Because then I would be labelled the angry black woman or the troublemaker or things like that. And then also there's scenarios that I would have known that this would have played out in this way, but I didn't want to put myself through it. And it's also a confirmation. It's like, yeah. Right? Because that's what it does, is that it makes you second guess yourself. And there were so many scenarios in there where you're like, okay, let me just hold on. Maybe they can see my message. Like, it's making you second guess yourself.
Yeah.
When you know, like, what is going on, and the way that they just shut it down completely.
Honestly, it was sickening. And to me, it was just such a huge like wake up for me, because all the things I've been feeling and that kind of twinge of like, oh, something isn't sitting right every time I hear somebody talking in this way. Yeah. And it's not just about them, you know, it's like, it was just and that's why I haven't been overly concerned with that, you know, this is not like now I have a bone with that organization. It's not about that. It was about the fact that the size of that platform is, I mean, it's global and it's significant, and nobody else was responding in the comments to me. You know, none of the other attendees were like, oh yeah, good question. Like, it was nothing. And it's just all swept under the carpet as if like, well, let's just not talk about this. And it triggered me in a massive way, because it made me really, you know, I do talk about energy, and I talk about, you know, we create our reality, and I talk about those things. And it really made me stop and say, where am I not being inclusive in the way that all these other things I've experienced have made me stop and go, oh, there's something uncomfortable in that. Where am I doing that in my practice? And so it's been a really great kickoff for me to really look into that, because I feel like that is what is needed. It's like a way of using this message that is just inclusive to all lived experiences. And obviously we're talking specifically about this instance in this time frame, but it's about all the things.
Exactly. Oh, okay. So I want to get into your take on things. And before that, I just want to go back to that scenario in terms of, so my message has come through even stronger for me. Like you, I kind of immersed myself into this world and it never sat right with me. And being a Black woman, I was like, I then turned the light on myself, right? So you hear all about personal responsibility and it's all very individualistic. So I was like, well, Nicola, what is wrong with you? Right? Like, why can't you just get it? Why? I remember I had a conversation with a coach once, and I was talking about most Black people, especially being brought up in the UK, you would have been told you've got to work twice as hard to get half as much, right? That's just a general thing that your parents kind of hand down to you.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I get that it can be seen as a limiting belief. On the other hand, it's the truth.
Yeah.
So I've got friends and family and myself who have experienced that and continue to do so. And a coach said to me that that's a limiting belief. And I was just like, at the time, I was so new to all of this and I was so kind of stunned. And I was like, well, maybe it is. And it threw me into this whole whirlwind that lasted years of me. And that's just one scenario. And it was just layered on top of me then turning the light inwards and being like, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
I need to fix this. I need to deal with it. And because I wasn't having conversations with anyone about this stuff, it was just like, it was all on me to work through. Yes, there's racism. Yes, there's cultural nuances and context, but that doesn't matter. Because if you talk about those things, if you think about those things, you'll attract more of them. And it just didn't, it just didn't make sense. But yet I was kind of carried along. And I feel like that's really toxic. It becomes quite toxic. And what's coming really strongly through for me is it's about personal development for the many and not the few.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing in that story that you're saying and this big global platform, it's personal development and growth and self-help for the few. But when it gets to the many and it doesn't apply, it's like, oh, we don't care. And I struggle so much with that because it's meant to be spirituality and wellness and love. And it's like, well, but it's only for some people. So you saying taking these tools, which are amazing tools, right? And that's why I also have a conflict because although I came to the world kind of through Denise as well, I've been using it all my life, but didn't know that I was, right?
Yeah. So that's why it feels like coming home. It's like, oh my gosh, this is real. I'm not crazy.
The name for that stuff. And so I know that there's a lot of those principles that work, and I know my life is testament to some of them. And which creates that added conflict as well. So to hear that you're kind of taking it and making it inclusive is just like, oh, you're speaking my language. So what has these kind of this awakening that you've had, how has it impacted the way that you see the industry?
Oh,
I know, big question.
It is. And you know what I've wanted to do, which is ridiculous, because it's like, how far do I personally want to go into like analyzing every single person's content? Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't need to do that. You know, like all I need to do is know enough of what I've seen, because that's where I was going, and it wasn't really healthy. It was like, okay, how much more evidence can I find of how bad this is? And so I had to put the brakes on that and be like, okay, you've got evidence now, like undeniable evidence. And that's why I was grateful for that experience. I'm not glad it happened, but I'm grateful that I experienced it, because it was really the final thing for me to be like, okay, when are you going to actually start taking action rather than just, observing it?
Yeah.
So that is the piece. And so for me, it's been, well, okay, now I have conversations to have in my community. And I know that I have conversations like this to have, where it's like, yes, let's really talk about it. And it's okay to have these conversations without being, pointing finger and blaming and naming and shaming. It's like, actually, let's just talk about the industry rather than the individual players in the industry.
Exactly.
And so, and that's the same for me. Like, I don't ever want anybody just going, oh, well, she's doing it. The way she's doing it is the way that blah, 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 whatever, because it's all just opinion. And it's all like, actually, all I'm doing is hopefully opening up this kind of work and this kind of opportunity to the people who would be coming towards me and erasing barriers, because I think that's the thing. And exactly what you just described, really like not making it so that when it's so harmful for somebody to come into your work and to really go away thinking, oh my gosh, I am like a flawed human because I've created this for myself. And so what the separation I've had to make is that obviously, so I talk a lot about consciousness, and I love talking about the subconscious mind and how that all works. And I'm obsessed with it. And what I know to be true is that we each have an individual consciousness, and then there's the collective consciousness. So what one person does in terms of, okay, well, I can take responsibility and I can look at my thing. You can't carry the responsibility for the collective consciousness. All you can do is play your part and understand that when you do that, there's something that happens above you, and there's something that happens below you, and there's something that happens out to the sides of you. But it doesn't change what is like ground into the roots of who we are as a like civilization. And so it's about understanding we get to be the change now. We get to be the change, and we have this huge opportunity on our hands that I really, really feel like, I do feel like real big change can happen now. I really do. And I don't know if that's my rose tinted glasses that I've been so conditioned to keep picking up and putting back on again. But I really do feel like, I see people now. I see so many more people still, sharing the message and taking action and doing positive things to make change and reviewing policies and really doing their own personal work. Because again, it's about like, what can I do as one drop of consciousness that has, when we all do that, it spatters everywhere and it starts to dilute through. And that's where the importance is. So for me now, when I look at like the industry as a whole, I know that I'm not carrying the weight of that on my shoulders to go and like, oh, well, I'm going to change the industry. That can happen. And that's kind of like the byproduct. It's like, actually, it's just about focusing and doing your work, what's right in front of you, doing that to the best you can possibly do it and staying in it, because that's where the sustainable change comes. And that's what pushes my buttons a bit, is when we get, into like activism mode for a short time and then burn out, because it's like, oh, well, how do I then do my business? Like, am I allowed to talk about something else now, or do I still have to talk about this? And that was so obvious, it's like, okay, great. You've never spoken about any of this before. And now all of a sudden, everything's changed. So there's balance to be found.
Yeah, there was definitely lots of performative allyship that happened. then, has it changed your relationship with the work?
Definitely. Definitely. I feel like it's about the language. And I think that's because, has it changed my relationship with how I practice for me? I do feel it has, because I feel like, because when I do my own practice, you know, when I'm not in front of people or teaching anything, I'm just me in my own room, I do feel even that has shifted and changed, because the things that I'm thinking about and the level, like, you know, let's take gratitude practice, you know, even just something as simple as that. The way that I can tap into that now is so different when I position the me that is in the bigger scheme of things, rather than just me in my circumstances, in my home, in my village, with my experience in front of my eyes. So it has changed that on my personal level, which obviously filters through. And because it always starts with us, that's the thing. So it's the order. Like, to me, it's about, well, if I do it deeply in me without having to broadcast it to the whole world, then that's where the change starts to filter through, because my clients benefit from it. And it doesn't have to be a big, like, you know, for me, I don't have to start like really being broadcasty and ranty about it. I can just be the example of this is just the new way that it gets to be now.
Yeah. And I love the way that you have taken like something like gratitude, and the way that it might be taught in what I call like the cookie cutter general model is, you be grateful for everything that you've got, blah, 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 very insular, very internal. Whereas we could take that notion of gratitude and widen it out to make it more whole.
Do you know, something that my husband used to say to me years ago when we first met, and it used to really annoy me when he used to say it. I'd be really emotional about something or really like fired up, and he'd be like, just sit in your deck chair on the moon. He's like, zoom out, sit in your deck chair on the moon. And I'd be like, I don't want to sit in a deck chair on the moon. I want to rant, and I want you to like understand and sympathize with me. And now I'm like, oh yeah, when I sit in that deck chair on the moon and I see the whole, like, it's just ridiculous. You know, when I start to see what goes on, and I think this is the thing, when we go on in ourselves and get so caught up in our like ridiculous stories and the things that happen to us, they're real experiences for every single one of us. And we all have the opportunity to like just understand where they come from and why, and then make choices from there. You know, it's just gathering that information. And so for me, it's now when he doesn't really say sit in the deck chair on the moon anymore, but I always remember it now, because it's like, it's that zoomed out approach to, I mean, I live on the Isle of Wight. So I'm literally like, I'm tucked away in a tiny village in a southern corner of the island. And I hardly leave my house. The pandemic's been great for me. and it, you know, it's really helpful for me to be a global citizen, to do that zoom out. And I think it's important, especially as a mother with children who have a very sheltered existence. It's really important that they understand that the way that they do things isn't the only way. It's so important.
So how does it, so this is something that I'm still trying to reconcile, is when it comes to the notions of like spirituality and law of attraction, and where and how that applies. So I get when it feels to me when it's taught, right, when things are good for people that it's good for, it works and it fits, right? But for people that life isn't good for, because of societal and systemic structures, it doesn't fit. Like just like with the rose-tinted glasses, like that's the response, because it doesn't fit, and it doesn't apply. Like the universal laws doesn't apply to that.
We need new laws. It's like, you know, who decided they were the universal laws? Do you know what I mean?
And that's what I think that where the conversation needs to go to is a recognition. We know white supremacy is filtered into all of our systems and structures, right? And that includes coaching, and that includes law of attraction. And I think that at the moment the conversation is very surface level, And we're not going to the conversation of actually, how about if law of attraction is steeped in white supremacy? Like,
I know.
And I know for a lot of people, they hear that and they're like, oh,
yeah.
Right. But the notions of it, I mean, I don't know a lot about African spirituality, and it's something that I'm wanting to learn more about. And there are those universal laws. There isn't law of attraction, but the vibration and frequency, that kind of language and notions stand true as well. So it's all kind of like the way that it's coaching and law of attraction is presented in the Western world.
Very problematic. I mean, and it's so ridiculous that really, if we look back in time, it's only been in the last 40 or 50 years that this stuff has really been like something that people talk about. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't even a thing before then. It's like, oh yeah, these are the universal laws. Like, let's just now it's just known and agreed, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, cool. Like, where are these laws written and where did they come from and all the rest of it? But I don't see anybody having a conversation. This is what I don't see. Is like, I don't see anybody having any conversation other than to just say, to just basically have a rant about it. You know, it's like, okay, well, let's point out all the problems. And then it's like, okay, well, these exist, right? They have existed. And I, for sure, now I've played my part in supporting and buying into that. And now it's like, okay, now it's time to choose again, right? Like you say, there's so much goodness and so much potential in, you know, I mean, law of attraction and manifestation. It's funny because I haven't even spoken about those things in their specific term until all of this, until that experience recently. And it's only since then that I've been like, I need to talk about this because we need to rewrite the language.
Yes.
And so that's what I feel like we need more of. And I feel like the people, you know, there are lots of kind of influencer status people in the coaching industry who have huge platforms, who have also the opportunity to just rewrite the language because, you know, it's not a religion, right? It's not going to offend anybody if we just create a new way of talking about it. Everybody's going to be okay. And more than that, more people are going to be okay because we get to actually spread it further without barriers.
Yeah. I'm going to float an idea with you. And this is just something that has just been me in my journal up to now.
I love it.
And it's the notion of manifesting has always jarred with me because as soon as someone says, oh, we're always manifesting, even the negative stuff. And then I'm like, really? Are we really? Like, what does that mean? Because that's always where the conversation ends. Yeah. And then sometimes it just goes into a place and I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, we stop talking in layman's terms now.
Yeah.
But something that I know to be true is on frequency.
Yeah.
And something that's really been coming up for me more recently is that it's not about the frequency of love that puts us in this love or light place. Actually, it's the frequency of enlightenment, which is the frequency of truth, right? And the frequency of enlightenment and truth doesn't always look as the kind of pretty, good vibes only. The frequency of enlightenment and truth can look really angry.
Yeah.
And it can look what some people might want to deem as aggressive, or I call it truth-telling. And in actual fact, that is the highest frequency. And that is the frequency that allows for the whole range of being human and the whole range of a lived experience, because we can access that no matter where. I could have been the victim of a everyday racism, microaggression, or full-blown something, but I can reach for my truth.
Yes. Yeah.
Choose to tell it or share it, and that frequency creates change. It brings people in, and that is rather than it's just like, we just got to have love and everyone's happy, and it's like, I'm not going to be effing happy. Right? Like,
Oh my gosh. So firstly, I'm like, thank goodness this is no longer only in your journal, because this this is, so that whole good vibes only thing is like one of my biggest bugbears. And even the talk around like negative emotions, I just don't buy into that. I just feel like we're human beings. We're supposed to have all emotions. I really believe that regardless of anything, we are supposed to feel all emotions. And I think what you've just said is like, it's so powerful. Can you imagine, you know, if our children grew up, that's so true in terms of they understand that, right? There's no fluffy, like, is it or isn't it? It's like this either is the truth or it isn't.
Yeah.
And so there's no area for misunderstanding or even miscommunication, you know, and like what you feel is always true. When you know, it's like if you tell me I feel this, I can't tell you don't feel that. You know, I might be like defensive or whatever it is because I didn't want you to feel like that because of what I said, but that doesn't mean it's not true for you. And so I love that. I think that's so, I can just feel that as you speak it. It's like, oh yes, that's so good. And I'm so glad it's not in your journal anymore.
Oh, good. I'm going to put it somewhere more concrete then.
Oh yeah. Yes.
I think that's the level that I would love to see things getting to. It's tone of blog. We're taking these notions and we stop bypassing, right? We stop bypassing it into it having to fit into this cookie cutter model of what we've been told is the way to manifest or is what spirituality is.
Yeah.
Because the lived experience of everyone doesn't fit into that.
No, and it's also, you know, the current, the spirituality thing, like it's just a commercial enterprise, right? Yeah. It is literally, I can't believe I just said that out loud.
I was like, as you said it, something inside me went, she's right.
It is literally a commercial enterprise. And it's sad, you know, it's sad. And, you know, I know that I love having crystals and I love having things. And then, you know, there's so many levels to this because then it's like, well, where does this stuff come from? And what does it mean if I have a dream catcher with feathers from certain places hanging in my office? There's so much to this that I feel like the current spirituality, and this is the same, like I went for a rebranding thing last year. And I felt myself being sucked down the, like, it's supposed to have crystals and like, you know, Palo Santo, and that's who I am now. Like, because I was literally subconsciously adhering to the stereotype that people would expect of me because I have a community called Spirit Lounge. And it's not about like, you know, spirituality in the sense of what we've now portrayed on Instagram. It's about like your spirit, you know, who what's inside of you? Where does your spirit come alive? Where does it need something from you? And it's really about tapping into that, your own unique essence. And so, just the whole thing with this spirituality in general, I mean, this is going down a rabbit hole and going slightly aside, but it's important. We don't know what we're talking about is the bottom line. You know, it's like we've glossed over it. We've made it look nice for Instagram. And now we're just all like, oh yeah, let's keep doing that.
Yeah. And it's capitalism ultimately.
Yeah.
Right. And
it is.
It feels like the law of attraction, because it becomes so individualistic, it is then supporting capitalism. It's supporting all the isms and the patriarchy, racism, like all of the systems. It's then replicating and supporting with the focus on the individual rather than the collective.
Yeah. And why do we have to keep on taking other people's stuff and making it
the appropriate
modern? Yeah. I just don't really understand why. You know, it's like surely as a species, we're continuously evolving, right? That's what we're taught in science, is that we are the modern day evolution of human beings. And yet here we are just recycling the same old, and upholding systems and belief structures inherent. It's like, and people get so upset when that is pointed out to them, because people just don't want to see it. People don't want to see that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lack of understanding of what white supremacy is and the way that it works, and the fact that it's actually built, it's in the fabric of the structures. And so until we start looking at that and examining that, then it will just continue. And what hurts me at the moment is that I see that it's perpetuating white supremacy, because when it's not personal development for all, it's personal development for the few and not the many. All we're doing is allowing the few to prosper and the few to do well, who are already doing well, because they've got all of the kind of everything stacked in their favour anyway. Then they've given all these amazing tools to support that. And it's just perpetuating the same cycle.
It's quite something when the penny drops. I feel like that's the thing. And I feel like it is important to support that, you know, like to support. It's important for people to have a space to allow the penny to drop. Because what I feel like right now is there's so much fear from people being terrified because they don't know, right? Like, oh, well, I don't know what's right and what's wrong, and I feel like it's like, okay, that's great. And, you know, that's the privilege you've been living with the whole time, is the fact that you haven't had to know. So it's like, now, okay, let's just put out some kind of safety mat so that you can just go out there and at least show willing to be making progress of some kind. You know, it's not difficult. We have the internet. We have all the things. We have so many resources. There is no excuse for anybody who, especially the people who claim to be talking about manifestation, law of attraction, spirituality, any of that, who claim to be here to heal the world.
Yeah, exactly.
To not be doing this exploration.
Because they're not healing the world then.
No, they're not healing the world. They're healing their like niche corner of the world.
Yeah. What do you think then, those people who talked about the rose-tinted glasses, we know that they didn't want to engage because it's uncomfortable and you were probably deemed as a troublemaker and they just didn't want to go there. Have you thought in your mind, I wonder what they were thinking? Like, what if they were going to just sit down and have a closed conversation with me, as in it wasn't in public?
Yeah.
What they actually think?
This is my presumption, obviously. And what it counts for, I have no idea. But what I feel is true is that it's just too big for them to comprehend. It's too big for them to take responsibility for. Because they do have such a massive platform and such a crazy vast catalogue of training materials and resources that if they really faced the truth, they would have a lot of work to do.
A lot of editing, right?
A lot of editing. So much. I mean, but that was live.
So that would mean that the principles on which they're teaching would be fundamentally...
Yeah, and it does feel that. And I felt that because of his angry response, you know, the way he tried to fumble his way through it and acknowledge it. And he just literally abandoned it. It was like, whoa, anyway, back to the content. And it was like, oh, you just sound like an angry, middle-aged white man. That's what you sound like.
Who's been questioned, whose authority has been questioned.
That's exactly what it felt like. And that was really hard. And like, it was hard for me to experience that because then the next day, like my stomach was churning because I was just thinking, am I really going toe to toe with this like law of attraction giant? Because I sought legal advice on it to be like, you know, should I name this? You know, like, what is within my like safe realm to not end up in some kind of lawsuit? To be able to talk about this, not from a way of like trying to point a finger, like I said, but just for a way of just shining light on this is what needs to change. And yeah, it was just overwhelming to contemplate. But I do feel like if you were to sit down with them, I mean, firstly, it feels like it would be a whole board, right? This is not a one-on-one conversation. It's like a whole board. It has to be approved by all the members. And I really feel like the ethos and the culture there is so like, it's so committed. It's so entrenched and they are so embedded in the rose tinted glasses culture that they just could not. I mean, how could they about turn on that now? It would basically mean scrapping the whole thing and starting over. And that's what it was a big, I can't even remember how long ago that was now. I think it's about 2 months ago, but it was like a match was lit, you know, like it was quick, and it was like, I can't unsee what I've seen here. Yeah. And now it's like every time I see, like, because the ads come into my feed and all the things, and I'm constantly looking at the comments to see. And then I went back into the Instagram feed to see, you know, was anything mentioned in the whole period where everybody else was like, you know, amplifying and you know, sharing their views. And it was just all so political. It was so political. And it's sad just because of the size of the audience. And I do feel as well, and another issue again, is that I do feel that size of audience, when not cared for properly, creates huge issues in terms of, as you mentioned, like even mental well-being, you know, in terms of looking inward and going, whoa. And I feel like that's what it's creating now. You know, I feel like I can see that. I mean, I've had my own experience in my family with mental health, and it's a real concern for me. Real concern.
Definitely. Yeah. The coaching industry has a whole part to play in that, most definitely. So we both know the lovely Tamu from Live 360.
Yes.
Lovely, lovely woman, a good friend of mine. And she did a post the other day that was called, I can't remember what it was called, but it was something along the lines of the law of attraction gaslights Black people.
Ooh.
I don't know if you saw it or not.
I don't know if I have seen that.
It was a really good post. I can't remember the ins and outs of what she said, but the overall, because we have lots of WhatsApp conversations.
Yeah, I bet.
And so the kind of nuts and bolts of it is that the law of attraction, this is my interpretation of it, because it puts this onus on personal responsibility, it then negates the lived experience and suggests that we attract everything that's happening, and then tells us it's your problem to go sort out. Yeah, totally.
And how was the response to that?
The response was, oh my gosh, it was like a sigh of relief for most people.
Yeah.
Who were like, I always knew that there was something with it and I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know exactly what it was. And I know that, so we'd been talking about in WhatsApp, and I had watched an Abraham Hicks video the week before. And so years ago, when I was into all of like having in kind of first entering the world, I would consume a lot of their content and bypass myself almost on the bits that didn't fit. And I was a bit like, oh. And I watched a video the other day that was hugely problematic. And gaslighting was off the scale in terms of it just not thinking about other people's lived experience.
Right.
And so going back to Tammy's post, it was kind of in sync with that. So in general, there were lots of people mentioning different kind of areas that they'd learned from and being like, it just doesn't fit. And what about other lived experiences? What are your thoughts?
So personal responsibility is something that, it's going to sound so ridiculously meta, I feel like it's so personal, right? I feel like it's okay for me to take personal responsibility for what's going on in my field, right? In my family, in the choices I'm making, in all of the pieces. I don't feel like, I don't feel like I have to own the entirety of the bad things that happen to me. I feel like, or the bad things that happen around me or to people I know or anything like that. I feel like personal responsibility is such a miscommunicated topic, because I do feel like there are some areas where it is important to take personal responsibility. And that it's back to that whole thing about the drop of consciousness and the whole collective consciousness. It's two separate things. So when, you're being invited to take personal responsibility for your feelings around any kind of racist event that might happen or something like that, that is not taking into account the collective. That's taken into account, okay, we're going to apply this blanket rule, this generic thing to you, and probably it didn't come from somebody who's had that lived experience. So it's come from somebody who probably has the rose tinted glasses, and exactly what we were speaking about earlier. I mean, it's much like the whole thing about money. It's like, well, of course it's easy to be in gratitude for your money when there's money in the bank. Yeah. Of course it is. And when it's not there, it's really, really hard to like stay in that trust and all the things that we're supposed to do. And I feel like it's the same thing, you know, like I had a conversation in my program recently when we were in the thick of all this, when I was talking about what we shared at the beginning here. And one of the ladies in there, she stayed quiet throughout, and we were talking about personal responsibility. We were talking about ownership. We were talking about law of attraction as it pertains to negative things that happen to people. We were talking about racism. We spoke about rape. We spoke about child abuse. And we're like, you know, no child is manifesting abuse.
Exactly.
But the collective societal consciousness accepts it as it's something that happens. We catch the bad ones. Sometimes we don't. That's accepted. I don't know why, but it is. And it's the same across the board for all of these different things where people don't really have an answer. They just blanket coverage on, well, you know, if they had blah, 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 because it's easier to do that than to actually face what's going on. Nobody has a single answer as to, okay, this is what needs to happen in order for everything to turn around. It's so much easier for people to just blame it on somebody else and, oh, well, you know, she was asking for it kind of vibe. It's basically what it is. And it is toxic. You know, it is really toxic. I talk about personal responsibility to people when they come into my programs, you know, for the results they get from my programs. And we're also aware that like we're still whole human beings outside of the program. So it's like, come into this session and take responsibility for your part here, your participation and all of the pieces. And of course, you know, live your human life as well. This is not excluding all of the things that I can't ever understand. And I mean, I can't ever understand somebody else's viewpoint on this world. I just can't climb into somebody else's body and skin and experience that. And the more that I accept that and understand that there are different experiences and different things that have happened to people, the more inclusive I'm able to become. And it doesn't mean I have to now be able to say, oh, I understand when you say things to me. It just means I have to hold space for, I may actually not understand and actually may not ever be able to imagine what that feels like. And I think that's just as important. Yeah. So yeah, personal responsibility. I mean, it's all one thing, isn't it? It's all the same. It's just like, okay, let's just put that in that bucket and then move on so we can get back to like the rainbows and the unicorns.
Exactly. It feels like a lot of the conversations I've seen, it stop and ends. Like the more progressive conversation recognizes that there are different lived experiences and then stops. And I'm like, okay, it's almost like, let's speak to that then. And for me, it's just about meeting people where they are, which is sounds like exactly what you're doing in your program. So you'll come into this session and we're going to work on X, Y, Z, but I will meet you where you are.
Yeah. And there's no accounting for even where somebody is in week 1 for where they might be in week 4 or 5 or 6, you know, because life is happening to us and around us all the time. And there's no accounting. I mean, like, you know, we can go back to the George Floyd incident and the huge awareness that followed. I couldn't have planned to, you know that was going to be like, okay, now I need to change everything to accommodate this new like thing that's happened. No, what needs to have happened is before even anything like that is happening, that it doesn't need to take something so outrageously media frenzied and damaging to get people to really understand. With coaches, it's supposed to be, you know, especially the term heart-centered and all of this. I sound so angry right now. I'm like, all of it. It's like, come on, people. Like, you are literally being hypocritical in everything you say right now. And the fact that there was this huge, like, outcry. I mean, I'm glad that there's more awareness. Of course I am. And it just feels a bit like this is the whole problem, you know? This is the whole problem. And I don't have the solution and I can't pretend I do.
No. But at least talking about it is going some way, right? Like I put up on my Insta stories yesterday, I think it was like Black Lives Still Matter, because it was all this kind of furore and then it's died down. But it is that, for me, the wellness industry, coaching industry is here to help people.
Yes.
And at the moment, it's not helping everybody. And in fact, is actually doing a disservice to some people because of the toxicity that it creates. And I don't know, I feel like I'm on this mission to raise awareness and show people how they can make it more for many. Because imagine a society where we all get to benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, where it's truth-centered. That's the whole point. Yeah. This is the whole point. It's like, how can we have an honest conversation? If I come into a conversation like this and I'm like, oh, I have to make sure I don't say anything wrong, or I have to, you can't operate like that. It's like you come as the human that you are in this moment and you speak what is true for you and where you are at right now. And that's how humans interact. And so this is, exactly what you were just saying sounds to me like this. So I'm so excited. I'm like, oh yeah, everything that's in your journal is like, that's what you want. That's what you're leading with. And it's so exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. Thank you so much for coming and bringing your open heart, which I knew you would, having this conversation. And it's a really hot evening. I don't know about you. I'm like sweating.
It's so hot. I have every window open. I'm like, please don't let the 16 dogs who live across the road bark. But thank you so much for having me and inviting me. And I'm just so excited to have these conversations and to hear what's in your journal and what is in your heart to share, because I feel like I do believe there's real opportunity right now for big change. And no matter what we feel about it, that opportunity is here. And I feel like that kind of momentum and that kind of direction is so what's needed. More of that in the coaching world, please.
Exactly. And I'm all about, when people talk about safe spaces, and there's a lot of space. There's a lot of spaces in this world, in this coaching world, that aren't actually safe for Black people and people in marginalised communities, because taking this conversation is either shut down or you're perceived as being angry or negative or all of those things. So it's not. There are many spaces that aren't safe. So I'm always up for talking to people that have those genuine safe spaces and are working on making them more safe and inclusive. And
that's all we can do. Keep on expanding.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Oh my goodness. Well, definitely on Instagram. That's my favorite playground of now. And I am totally Laura over there. And like I said, my subconscious mind is one of my favorite things. And so one of the things that I have had on my website over the past few months is a free hypnosis, which is all about regaining your personal power. So people are welcome to come and grab that if they would like it at totallylaura.com/power.
Amazing. Thank you so much, my love.
Thank you. You're so welcome.
Hey love, and thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. Please head over to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review and a rating. It helps this important conversation and message get to more people. And also please feel free to share it with anyone who you think needs to hear it. I would love to continue the conversation over on Instagram. I'm there at A Life More Inspired. And I will see you on the next episode.